Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be something that I haven't had done in a long while, because most of the time I moved on from doing this to doing video games and other YouTube stuff and other video content. But today we are learning about Grazilian history, how Brazil was founded, who is the leader, and the historical events that made Brazil as a nation. So, without further ado, let us get into Brazilian history. So, the country of Brazil was founded on December 29th, 2023, in the continent of Tenho, along the same land or the same and within the same country as Feza-Fili. The government system of Brazil was a monarchy, and the leader of Brazil's country was run by a man by the name of King Bruno Santos I. Achievements and events along the years. Brazil joined the MIPR Council on January 1st, 2024. Ever since their existence, there were tensions between them and Feza-Fili due to border disputes that, if weren't changed, could have caused a war between them. But luckily, they both resolved their problem on March 24th, 2024, where they would even the border along between the two countries. And how did Brazil own a portion of Feza-Fili? Was because since there were three new, and worldwide there were three new nations that were discovered, and each of them didn't have a home to claim or have a territory to claim as their home. So the biggest nations that they had in Tenho had to divide half of their land or a quarter of their land with the new nations in order for them to have a home, since everywhere else also has a lot of territory, and also they've already claimed it and they're not going to be sharing with it. So the only few people that were available to share were Feza-Fili, Bamaya, and Morlant. But Feza-Fili shared its territory with Brazil, and that's where. And then when they did share their territory with Brazil, there were tensions about the border. The Grazilians had limited space compared to the Feza-Filians. The Feza-Filians had like this much space, but the Grazilians only had this much, so there was a little fighting going on verbally and diplomatically, and it could have led to war. But luckily, they went to the MIPR Council to solve the issue, and they have decided to even the border by sharing half of the same length of the country. Now, anyway, there were also other conflicts that happened around when they existed, but they decided to be isolated from it, which were, as it says on my slide here, during the Battalion War and the Angolan Revolution, they have continued to be isolated from other conflicts and wars going on around them. As time went on, they would later make a business deal with the country of Manaus, but about trading each other's resources to sell and trade amongst themselves. Which Manaus was an older country, and it was south of Feza-Fili, and it was in between the new country Angola, Morlant, and it's also a neighboring from the sea towards the country of Thailand. And speaking of which, I would definitely go ahead and just no, I was going to show you on the map, but I'm like, no, I don't think you all need to see the map right now. I'll show it later. But regardless, let's continue. So, after they made a deal with Manaus for trade and resources, the first war that they were in and started was from June 11th to the 22nd. This war started out with a termination of a deal King Bruno made for Alejandro, the leader of Manaus, which was to, and the purpose of the deal was to strengthen their business, but Alejandro refused the offer, which gave King Bruno the excuse and the opportunity to start the war. From the beginning, they were doing well because of how their tactics relied on quick movements, but it also caused them to lose a lot of men, which would cause King Bruno to rely on the help from Tenaria or hire mercenaries with Tenaria, and with Tenaria's help, they won the war and made Madas their colony, which would be the first step of creating their own empire. And at this time period, the king Bruno wanted to build an empire because the resources that they had with Faceophilia shared with Faceophilia was not enough for them. Was enough for them to survive on, but not enough for them to make money off of. So that's why they first expanded into trading. But then when Bruno wanted to basically make more money from Madas by taking 50% of its resources or 60% of its resources, they refused, and they were the aggressors. They were the attackers of that war. They won, and they occupied Madas for a bit. As we continue, ever since the victory of the Grazil-Madas War and their occupation of Madas, their population began to grow, and tensions between Grazil and Madas had subsided because of two things. One, when the Grazilians won the war, because of the help with Tenaria, they made a treaty called the Grazilian Occupation Treaty, where everyone who lost to Brazil will be shared equal power and everything, but they have to owe their allegiance to Brazil in order for that to work. And basically, they forced them to sign a contract, making them as colonists to their empire. And that's very kind of controversial if you really look at it, but in my universe, I find it really, let's say, interesting, but also, starting off, they were from great to being, alright, that's weird, and then back to being, okay. Basically, they were imperialists, is what's happening. So, we're going to go to the other wars and conflicts that they were involved in. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so 2 months later, after Grazil won the Grazil-Mandaean War, the leader of Grazil, King Bruno Santos I, decided to write 4 letters to 4 different countries, which were addressed and sent to Haiti, Angola, the Philippines, Morocco on the 19th of August. The reason that Bruno did this was because he wanted to hopefully avoid war and instead have a strong economic foundation with some or all of the nations. 2 days later, on the 21st of August, Bruno would receive letters from the nations that he addressed and would begin to look through them. The leader of the Philippines was willing to trade with them in exchange for some materials, but as for Haiti, they refused politely because they were still focused on reforming their home. But the final 2 letters he would receive would be from Angola and Morocco, and then those letters, they told Bruno that they were not interested in his deal because they were aware of what they did to Madas and insulted his country, which resulted with. And they both told Bruno that if he were to physically, or basically give him an ultimatum, that if he were to physically land on their own territory, that they would respond with a declaration of war. Bruno, seeing this, was angered because, one, they insulted his country, and 2, well, for reasons like what happened to Madas. They refused an offer. Grazil didn't want to take it the good way, so he got mad, went to war with them, was about to be on the edge of losing, hired mercenaries to help him win the war, occupied Madas. And when the other nations saw it, they were shocked. Some were not really intimidated by it because Grazil was kind of small at the time, but like they said, over time the population grew. But even though the population grew a little bit, they were not really intimidating to most nations. But for the smaller nations, though, they were kind of intimidating. So that's where tensions and things escalate again, with Bruno's anger clouding his judgment instead of thinking logically, like, okay, they don't want to trade with me, I should just leave them alone and try again later. Oh no, but instead he's like, oh, they don't want to trade with me? Okay, I go to war. Prepare the army for war. I'm going to invade your country. You insulted my country, so I'm going to invade your country. That's basically what his mindset was. But here we go. As I was saying, Bruno, seeing this, was angered that Gingola and Baracco refused his offer and insulted his country, which made him decide to plan war on Gingola and Baracco. Bruno wanted to prove that Gingola and Baracco are no match for Grazil's army and tactics, but despite Bruno's confidence in his army's skill, he also sees that he doesn't have the numbers, and having his control over Madaz isn't enough. So he looked for any nation that has a powerful army and would be willing to take any offer he would give them, and that country would be Grazilian. Now, Grazil at this time was not, well, weapon-wise, they were kind of modernized, but they didn't have like the exact weaponry that most nations had since they were recently new. The only thing they had were like the submachine guns, automatic rifles, machine pistols, bazookas, grenades, and 50 cal machine guns, basically regular modern day weaponry. But also they had semi-automatic rifles and bolt action rifles, which were a mix of being old and new and in between, or basically sometimes modern and outdated equipment. And they started to have tanks, but the tanks that they created also require resources, so they didn't have a lot at the time anyway. And even though Grazil owns Madaz's tank armor personnel is very big compared to Grazil's, and they have an air force too, but it's still not compared to Baracco, who has a lot of soldiers, and Gingola, who has a tank and 100 more soldiers than Grazil does. So he looks up to Grazilian, and Grazilian has known its history of quick tactics, strategic thinking, heavy armor vehicles such as panzers and heavy armored tanks, artillery, and basically good strategy. So that's why they look to Grazilian for help. Bruno and Chancellor Weber of Grazilian would meet in person on Monday, August 26, 2024 to make an alliance with each other. Bruno offered Weber a fortune of $1 million in gold, and that's another thing. The resources that they had was gold. But they know that they can buy people to join on this side, but basically bribing them with the amount of wealth that they had shared from Faith Affiliate. So they use that to their advantage, and they also use that to pay for their soldiers and everything they use to build, right? That's why I want to answer that. That's probably what you were thinking, like, so how could they afford going to war, or how could they afford the weapons and materials and also the supplies they needed for their soldiers if they don't have any money? Well, they did have money, and they have tons of it, and they know how to use it. So, anyway, off the $1 million in gold, along with the occupation of Baracco, if he helped Bruno win the war, and in return, Weber offered Bruno his support with military enforcement and aid of air, land, and naval forces. 2 weeks later, on September 8, 2024, Grazil and Grazilian would launch their assault on the shores of Gingola and Baracco. This would be the beginning and start of the Grazil-Angolan War. Throughout the war, Grazil tried to weaken the Allied forces so that he could claim Gingola as a colony for their upcoming empire, but would result with them and their allies suffering heavy casualties, and Grazil committed a war crime that would later result with them facing charges and a punishment for their crimes, which would prevent them from conquering or building an empire like they wanted. A few months later, Grazil would be convinced by Tasmania to join their fight against Sufyan's rebellion and prevent Greenland and their allies aiding them. They were promised that if they helped Tasmania crush the rebellion and win the war, Tasmania would be able to aid them with their imperial conquest. From the beginning, Brazil aided Tanzania with supplies and wealth, and in return, Tanzania would provide them with soldiers to protect their country as well. But when they invaded Manila and would eventually lose the occupation of the island to the Allies, Tanzania ordered their soldiers to regroup in Thailand to help reinforce their defenses, but that would leave a bad impression on Brazil, seeing them as liars, and would rather leave the country to be occupied by the Allies, or would rather left them to be left their country to be occupied by the Allies than help them. So Brazil then realizes the mistake he made and decides to negotiate with the Allied forces and convinces them that he would aid on their cause if, for exchange for a lighter sentence within the trial or a pardon, and would own a piece of unknown territory that would be granted to them in return for their allegiance. So the Allies accepted, and then after Tanzania and the remaining Tanzanian loyalists surrendered, and the trial resulted with Brazil, and the trial and the court going as presented as it was. Brazil was granted pardon and would later receive their first colony in Pacifica on March 7, 2025. So, basically, Brazil, for the first time, realizes that if he makes allies with the wrong people, they could eventually leave him to die, or basically leave him to die, or leave him to be occupied, and make him take the fall for the crimes that they didn't commit. Even though there was one time they did commit a crime, but they also awoken up Bruno's mindset of his country. Like, yes, they should be powerful, they should be dominant like the other nations, but at the same time, they're not, and we should respect. She should respect, as it were. Not to mention, he wants to be good friends with powerful nations, so that way, if something happens, he can rely on them and not be on the losing side, basically. But and as of Brazil, yes, they have successfully managed to. Now, the reason why they got pardoned for their crimes was because, one, they didn't really do anything, but they were convinced, and they did convince the jury and the court that they were lied to by Tanzania, and were convinced by Tanzania that they helped them win the war, that they could help them reconquer their territories, which they thought was true. But then they realized, as soon as when the Tanzanians were like, okay guys, we gotta go, we gotta leave Brazil open for the Allies to take him over, and we can focus on our defense on Thailand. He was like, okay, you know what, I'm not going to stick up with this. I'm done with this. I'm done being a puppet. So yeah, so that's how that is. If you haven't seen, I believe I have made a video about that war in particular, the Grazilian War. If the Grazilian, yeah, I made a video about the Grazilian War here. I just gotta look for it. Hold on. Yeah, I think I did. Hold on. I still not see it. Well, I made the one about the Grazilian War. Apparently, I haven't made a video about the Grazilian War, but that will be something to cover in a future video. But also, later today at 5 p.m., there will be a poll for you guys to select a country for me to cover next time. And without further ado, I appreciate you guys for tuning in, listening to basically my learning video of Brazil. Now I know probably there wasn't much because I know I kind of sped through it a little bit, but the reason why I did that is because it's just to conserve and save time. But if you want, maybe I can do. I could try and teach you guys about these countries slower next time, so that way you can like listen and also have an idea and everything else, political ideologies and stuff like that. But thank you guys for watching, and I will go ahead and start making. Um, or wait, I'll be looking at the polls and see which poll option got the most views. And also, don't forget to check out the Quarry gameplay that I finally finished. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more armament related videos, which I'm finally coming back to. So hopefully this will be the start. And I really appreciate you guys for subscribing and liking my videos. I can't believe we're also at 593 subscribers. Let's keep up the views. Share these videos with your friends who are interested in this stuff and would like to learn more. And we'll just see how the days, how this year will take my channel and everything, and how we do together. So, without further ado, like I said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and be on the lookout for more videos. Peace.